morning. I'm just 5 weeks on the job, so I get to use notes. Thank you to the Chamber for hosting today. This is really an honor for the YMCA. I also want to thank our Y staff who have been here helping support this event. If you're Y staff, if you could just raise your hand. We've got a few of them around here. So thank you for that. I think Colin really wanted to just draw some inspiration from the Celtics that we used to see playing on the court. This magical building really comes to life at 2 p.m. Despite the fact that we open at 5 in the morning. At about 2, 500 kids emerge through our YMCA into the lobby. Even more impressive is 75% of these kids get some type of scholarship thanks to many people in this audience. These kids need the Y, and we need these kids. Anyone wonder what that pile of dirt is out in front of the Y? You guys see that? It's the beginning of the Y of the future. Your Y, your family's Y, your employees' Y, your neighbor's Y, and the Y of the City of Lynn. This new YMCA has been a community effort. We raised $22 million from private donations, which included a $4.8 million grant with the City of Lynn partnership, a Mass Works grant, so that we could get a lot of that road work done. We hope and we pray that this Y is done on deadline, which is next spring, May of next year. Today, our YMCA provides YMCA Academy education experience for 250 kids a day. Our new Y will provide Y Academy education for 350 kids a day. Today, we provide 600 kids in Lynn swimming lessons over the course of the year. Our new Y will provide 600 kids a month with swimming classes. Today, we provide about 500 healthy snacks and meals for kids each day. Our new Y will provide 900 meals a day for kids in Lynn. Today's Y employs 110 people from the City of Lynn. Our new Y will employ 220 people from the City of Lynn. Simply put, today's Y is good. We teach, we mentor, we coach, we support. The new Y campus will really be a game changer for the City of Lynn. It will serve as an anchor to the area deemed as the education district. Our members will be your clients, your customers, your employees, your patients, your friends, and hopefully you. Please join us in our effort to build the best Y in the nation. It's your Y. Help us share this message with the City of Lynn. I want to close with a really quick story about a note that I recently received from a Lynn Y member. She said, before I joined the Y, I really didn't feel like I mattered. Now I'm welcomed at the door, asked about my son and grandson, and I believe that when I don't show up, I'm missed. Thanks for giving me back the feeling of self-worth. So that's just a small sample of what we do every single day. And I want to thank you and invite you to learn more about our new YMCA. If you look on your table, there's a blue 1-month guest pass. And you're welcome to redeem it now, or you can hold it for a year and use it when we open our new Lynn YMCA. So thank you again for this opportunity for coming to our YMCA. We look forward to hosting this similar breakfast in about 15 months in our new gymnasium. With that, I'd like to welcome up our Honorable Mayor Thomas McGee, who's going to talk about some of these fabulous transportation initiatives for the city. Please join me in welcoming Tom McGee.
Good morning. Thank you for that kind introduction. It's great to be here with a room full of people, Lynn Area Chamber, to talk about transportation. As my staff knows, I have to be dragged to the table to talk about transportation. But I want to thank Kathleen and the YMCA for hosting us this morning. And she explained the new facility that's opening across the street out of the City of Lynn, and the state were very supportive of that project to make that a reality. I want to thank Colin and the Board of Directors, the Lynn Area Chamber of Commerce for convening this transportation forum. And I hope that this is the first of many of its kind, working with the business community, citizens of the City of Lynn, and just as importantly, regionally, to collaborate on the issues that we face and care about together. But transportation is clearly something that everybody in this room understands is important. And no matter where we go, and I've been very involved over the last 14 months working with my colleagues in the region. And I know that members of Congressman Bolton's staff is here as well, so it's good to be able to be with them and collaborate, as well as the Lynn delegation, members of the City Council. It's good to work together, but I've been collaborating with both mayors and town managers in the region on a lot of different issues, and we actually were in a forum recently on arts and culture and how we can really collaborate and continue to work. We're seeing great things happen in Lynn. And where did we end up talking in that forum from people from the region? Transportation. So it doesn't matter what you do, where you go, what you talk about, transportation continues to be the place that people end up, because we understand in this region, particularly in the city, that transportation is a key driver that will help us grow our economy, get people where they need to go, and create a future for everyone that is going to allow us to thrive and make things happen in the region. So we're excited about the opportunity to be involved in the Transportation Action Plan in the City of Lynn. And a lot of those issues that you probably heard me talk about, and all of us around this table have been talking about for years, whether it be rapid transit expansion in the City of Lynn. See, former Mayor Costin here, who's been a loud and strong voice for that for a lot of years, and understands the need for regional transportation, regional transit, creating a 21st century system of regional rail with electrification and quick headway, and allowing us to really in this region have access both north and south, and just as importantly, water transportation, which we continue to work towards because we understand it's the lowest cost, best return for the dollar in terms of the opportunities right now, and with all of the challenges we're facing in transportation. Water transportation clearly from the City of Lynn and the North Shore, Salem has proven that this region can sustain and both create, sustain, and grow water transportation, and they're looking for another ferry to continue to access their community. And we really believe after a couple of years of really successful pilot program that year-round service from the City of Lynn to Boston and the surrounding communities is really a key piece of our transportation opportunities moving forward. Lynn sits at a unique situation. If you look at it from a map which I have in my office, looking at it from the air, where we're located, how close we are to Boston, but just as importantly, how we really are a bridge to 750,000 people north of us, we really are uniquely placed. And if you go down to the commuter rail garage and you stand there and think about multimodal transportation options, and if you looked at the region and really looked at the state, where can you look where you have water transportation, absolute rapid transit connections that need to happen, regional rail and bus service, as well as we're close to creating the final pieces for the Northern Strand bike trail that will connect us all the way out to Everett and connect those people from that area all the way here to our beautiful beach, really half a mile from here. Lynn is a place where those kind of opportunities sit in one location to make a multimodal regional transportation hub to allow us to not only create the opportunities that we see in the City of Lynn, and we understand those opportunities, but just as importantly, working with our partners in this region to create a system that works for all of us. And for that to be, for us to see what needs to happen here in Lynn, and I think that's why Lynn is poised with this Transportation Action Plan, is that we really do, a lot of people look to Lynn to see how we can be the allies that they're looking for. And it's not just north-south, it's creating those east-west connections in the region that allow us to not only see the commuter rail communities thrive and see the transit-oriented development that MassInc, Transit Matters, A Better City, and so many others have clearly articulated in their reports, understanding the opportunities, but it's also letting the communities just sitting a mile or two or three away that don't necessarily see those connections and how important these transportation investments are to them. By thinking about the last mile connections, we really are thinking about a regional opportunity. Again, 750,000 plus people connecting to a 21st century regional rail, water transportation, rapid transit system would be transformative, and I think would reflect that this region and the city that we are hearing today will be able to benefit from those kind of investments. We've talked about it for a long period of time, and I have in my office, thanks to my good friend and great Senator Brendan Creighton. He got me a scheduled from the 1938 narrow gauge line. I don't know how many people here know about the narrow gauge rail line. Please, there's a number of people here. 1938, the narrow gauge line was the Lynn Revere Boston Railroad. Started here in Lynn, ran right along the line, which is now the current blue line, wound its way through Winthrop, and then it ended up in the East Boston waterfront where you took the ferry to Boston. And the reality was that the blue line was going to be the recreation of the narrow gauge line here to the city of Lynn. Because at that time, and if you read the outline of what Lynn was, great community, beautiful beaches, rapid transit access to Boston, Lynn was the place to be, and that's on the 1938 schedule of the narrow gauge line. We understand that here. So many of us are on this table today, around these tables today, have understood that transportation is the key piece of what we need to do to create opportunity for the people in this community and opportunity for the region. That's the clear piece of what we need to do. And I'm very happy to be working with Colin, and when I got a chance to sit with him when I met with him the first time, and he right away said, we want to be a voice in the chamber. The chamber would like to be a voice in terms of creating opportunities for transportation, investment, and I couldn't have been better music to my ears, because the business community needs to be a player in this. The business community needs to step up and be a strong voice, and we in this region have to build those connections. It's not just about Lynn, but it's important that the Lynn Chamber, which is now growing, so it doesn't include Lynn, it's the Lynn Area Chamber of Commerce. We need to work with our partners, neighbors, and friends, and elected officials in the region to start to have a voice for investment in transportation in Lynn and in the region. It has to happen. And so I'm very happy to be here today with, and I'll have a chance to introduce Joe in a second. But we were talking about everybody, the people aware of what South Coast Rail is. Raise your hands if you know what South Coast Rail is. Where's the people know what South Coast is? Maybe you do. Mayor Driscoll hit the nail on the head, I don't know, about 8 or 10 months ago, when we were meeting and talking about how we need to invest in the region, what do we need to do to make sure that the North Shore and Essex County starts to see those investments that we have not seen in 50 years. The reality is we haven't seen these kind of investments that the greater Boston area has seen. And she said, I never knew what is South Coast. It used to be New Bedford, Fall River, Dartmouth. All of a sudden it became South Coast. Now it's going to be South Coast Rail. So they were able to come together, create a vision, and think about how they could create opportunity for their region. Well, in many respects, we sit here, closer to Boston, Lynn in particular, in a place that regionally we've always been really connected, that we haven't been able to have that stronger voice. So it's important the business community, the leaders come together and start to say, it's our time for investment, it's our time for the transportation needs that will meet our needs for the future for our children, and more importantly, it's our time in the city of Lynn to be the leaders, to be the gateway city again, to work with our regional partners to create a transportation system that will benefit the state as well. So glad to be here with all of you, and I'm honored at this point to introduce someone who I had a chance to work with over the last few years, Joe, right? And I'm very impressed with his vision and his ability to be a real voice for the MBTA. Joe recently retired. Joe Aiello recently retired as partner at Meridian Infrastructure Managers of Private Equity, and I'm going to read a long introduction because I think it's important for everyone in the room to understand Joe's background, where he's coming from, and why it's so important to have him here today, and just as importantly, why it's so important that he's on the Fiscal Control Board and is a voice for what we believe is a future opportunity at the MBTA. So he was at Meridian Infrastructure Managers, private equity investor, developer of infrastructure. He had served as CEO of North American Investment Committee member on a variety of the firm's funds, and recently was a member of the board of directors and its executive committee. Joe Aiello was active with the firm from its beginning in 2005. Meridian manages in excess of $10 billion of investor liquid equity. These projects have a construction value exceeding $70 billion. Meridian has grown to a global platform active throughout the Western Hemisphere, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. In the U.S. market, Mr. Aiello was a key team member on a number of the industry's signature projects, such as NTE and LBJ managed lanes projects, the Port of Miami Tunnel, the Long Beach Courthouse, and the Purple Line LRT project in Maryland. Prior to Meridian, Joe Aiello served as Executive Vice President at AECOM, where he held a number of operating positions, including President of AECOM Enterprises. Mr. Aiello helped drive the firm's growth through service diversification, planning and architecture, and geographic expansion to markets such as Puerto Rico and the Middle East. Since July 2015, he has served as the pro bono chairman of the Fiscal Management Control Board at the MBTA in Boston. Was appointed to this 5-year term by Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker. In the 3.5 years to date, the board has driven a rapid pace of change and cost effectiveness. In that period, the T has accrued approximately $600 million in operational savings against an annual $1.5 billion operating budget, while maintaining and recently increasing levels of service. The MBTA has increased its annual capital spend from $300 to $900 million and is projected to exceed $1.5 billion by FY 2021. Joe Aiello has been a particular champion of utilizing alternative procurement methods to obtain better outcomes for the MBTA. He has pushed the authority to draw up a strategic plan that focuses the MBTA on improved service to customers, adaptation in an environment of immense technological change, climate change, and growing concerns about regional congestion. He's an alumnus of the Harvard Kennedy School, where he's frequently guest lectured and served on its discussion panels. From 2010 to 15, he served on the Belfast Senate Advisory Board. He also currently serves as the APTA Board of Directors, as well as other nonprofit and private enterprises. Joe Aiello has been driven by the notion of fairness and equity, and I can absolutely speak to that. He's been a pleasure to work with. To key community activists that shaped Boston's Big Dig from an earlier proposal that would have torn apart city neighborhoods to the carefully designed and constructed project it became. Spent a number of years as developer of nonprofit and affordable housing across the Boston area. It's always been a force for insisting that private and public enterprises take the broad view of infrastructure investment impacts on people, neighborhoods, and environment. What more could you ask for? He continues to serve as Meridian as a part of the Times Senior Fellow, currently assisting the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico in its development efforts. And I'm honored to bring him up here this morning, and I'm very honored to have Joe Aiello here with us this morning. Joe, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, and appreciate that overly generous and I won't say long-winded introduction. And Colin, it was great to meet you. All these years I thought then Chairman and now Mayor was the head of the Greater Lynn Chamber of Commerce, because it seems like every time we had a discussion, possible discussion about any transportation issue would always be accompanied with, have you been to Rossetti's? Have you been to the Blue Ox? When was the last concert you came up here to? And he has certainly been a great advocate, not just for transportation, but for all things Lynn, and has been a pleasure to work with. But thank you so much for the introduction. I also want to thank all of you who have come here today, and the legislative delegation that is sprinkled throughout the room. So thank you. You are all important stakeholders in what the MBTA tries to do, and it's only with your advocacy that we can understand what we truly need to do. So we'll talk a little bit about advocacy at the back end of this discussion, but it's an important ingredient for making the FMCB to be able to achieve that which we have been able to achieve to date, but there is a very long way to go. It's particularly dangerous to follow the mayor talking about transportation. More or less took about 90% of my talk, but that's okay. So let me, if I could maybe just simplify my remarks, keep them to a minimum, and then spend time on a Q&A. That would be okay. I think that T is in a very different place than it was 5 years ago. I think thanks to then Chairman McGee in crafting the FMCB legislation, as well as providing us directives and guidance about how the T needed to reform itself. The T is in a much better place than it was a while back. While we certainly need to do more, I think it's important to sort of just reflect on some of the things that we've done. So I just want to go through a list that doesn't necessarily directly all affect Lynn, but just more of a regional enterprise. We have a commuter rail system that at every way you might measure it, is absolutely more reliable than it was 5 years ago. If you look at our on-time performance metrics, if you look at our mean miles between breakdowns, we have really pushed the commuter rail system to provide a much better level of service than we've had in 5 years. We have added more than 6,000 annual trips on the commuter rail system around the region. We have a substantially younger and less polluting bus fleet, which means it's good for the environment. It also means, again, more reliability on the buses than we had before. We had a very aged bus fleet. We've been adding service. In addition to the commuter rail system, we are now providing late night service, early morning service, because we know, particularly in the Boston area, there are a lot of people going to Boston, work in the service industries, work in the hospitals. They work non-traditional hours, and the ability for them to get to work and to come home from work at odd hours is critically important. We're not yet at a 24-hour service delivery system, but we've really expanded some key routes to allow folks, if they want to take transit, can take transit early in the morning and late at night. We've extended the Silver Line over to Chelsea. So now you can get from the area of the mall in Chelsea and the Moolers all the way to Logan Airport Station on the Blue Line for a transfer onto the Blue Line, and then continue through the Ted Williams Tunnel to get to South Station and the connections to the Red Line. So all those are pieces of service that we have added. You know, in the world of transit, trying to do big things takes a long time. So while those are improvements that we have been able to deliver, and there are others since we arrived, some of the really big moves are underway. When we first got to the MBTA, we had fortunately inherited an initiative from the previous administration to replace the old Orange Line cars and the old Red Line cars with new cars. But we began to hear from advocates in Quincy, we began to hear from advocates in Cambridge about the fact that many of their residents were not able to get on a train during rush hour. In fact, we heard many folks come to us and tell us that if they were at Harvard Square Station or Central Square Station or Kendall Square Station on the Red Line as an example, during rush hour they have to wait probably for the third or fourth train before there was room for them to get on. So it certainly wasn't enough capacity. The staff had previously thought, well, let's replace like for like. Our view was we should not be replacing systems in the T to replicate what the Red Line was required to do in 1985. We should be trying to figure out what the T needs to look like in 2035. So we immediately looked at a quick analysis of ridership. We saw that we had an opportunity to trigger an option for more Red Line cars and Orange Line cars. So what we have put into play are additional vehicles, power upgrades, signal upgrades that will allow us on the Red Line to move from effectively a 6-minute headway to a 3-minute headway, doubling the capacity of the Red Line. On the Orange Line, we're doing the same thing. We're running from approximately 7-minute headway to a 4.5-minute headway, just sort of roughly that. Not quite a doubling of capacity on the Orange Line. Both of those systems will be in place by 2024, and the amount of new passengers that we'll be able to attract on both of those will be substantially improved, and we hope that those help with the congestion problem. In a similar fashion, we took a quick look as we were looking at that Red Line and Orange Line solution. We said, okay, what about the other two core lines that exist in the system? The Green Line. Green Line, again, plagued with horrible overcrowding and unreliability. We have implemented a $2 billion program to double the effective capacity on the Green Line. We are actually going to be modifying some of the tunnels. We're modifying track alignments to make sure that we can buy a standard light rail vehicle for the first time. We've always had to have a specially made vehicle for the T. That meant two things. One is that the average cost of a vehicle was substantially higher than it should be than if you're buying one off the shelf. And the second thing it means is since you're buying a prototype that nobody else has, you tend to have more things go wrong with that system because you're the only one buying this special vehicle. So that's been put into place. We're just at the beginning of that road, probably won't have those set of improvements done until about 2030, but again, a substantial rehabilitation of that. Getting back to the Blue Line, we inherited an environment where the red to blue connector was dead. I mean, it was nowhere on anybody's playbook. We will be passing next week a final Focus 40 plan that will reintroduce the blue to red connector. And what I'm hoping is that we have a vote coming up in June through the 5-year capital improvement program that will be able to garner support for the preliminary engineering to be able to put together a design build package for that work. That remains to be seen. There's still a lot of discussions that have to happen at the FMCB level, but that certainly provides significant benefit to this corridor. It's not the move that gets the Blue Line up to Lynn, but it certainly, were that to happen, would make that whole ride much more attractive because you could get right to Charles Street Station for a single transfer over to the Red Line and to Kendall Square and points north. We also, let me sort of just go back to the Red Line and Orange Line because one of the things I think one of the accusations that's often given to the FMCB is that we're pretty timid. And what I try to do with the Red Line in particular is to describe what would happen if we decided to try to create that effective capacity in a different way. If we were to try to build a system today from Alewife all the way down to Braintree, it costs us about $40 billion. It would probably take us about 30 years by the time we got through the environmental process and figured out how to do all the construction. The fact that we're able to do that project for less than $3 billion is a credit to the T staff who thought about how to maximize throughput on that system. So it's quite a bit of different thinking. You're not going to see a big upheaval of big construction trucks coming in. It's really a much more sophisticated signaling system, a significant upgraded power system, and more vehicles, and just increasing the throughput of what you have there. That's going to be a similar exercise to what Mayor McGee and the legislature have been leading on, which is the transformation of the commuter rail system. The question we're trying to answer over the next number of months, culminating hopefully with a decision by the board by the end of the year, is whether that railroad capacity that exists today should continue to be a commuter rail system or should it be a regional rail system? Should there be all-day service? Should there be more frequent service? Should we be electrified with that service so we get the better performance of greater acceleration from electrical multiple units? And can we benefit from the incredible air quality benefits by moving away from diesel? It's a big discussion item that's going to be happening in the fall where we're pleased with the advocacy work that you all have been providing to weigh in on your views there. But in terms of things to pay attention to, that's probably the next big swing for us. When we were appointed to the board by Governor Baker in 2015, we had just come out of that horrible snow period where the entire T had really melted down. And we were struggling just to get our handle on how to run day-to-day operations. A number of folks senior managers who could have retired, did retire because of the craziness that existed during that period. It was a period of great uncertainty. And plopped right in the middle of it, we began in July. In August, we get a presentation from the T staff that says, oops, we have a problem. The Green Line Extension Project. It was one of the commitments that the state had made as a mitigation for the Big Dig to make sure we weren't relying too much on private automobile use for mobility through the region. The MBTA had signed a contract with the federal government stating that the that the cost of the GLX project was going to be about $2 billion in January 2015. By August of 2015, report came to us that the costs are now trending towards $3 billion. Our view was we had this horrible state of good repair that was in excess of $7.5 billion, and if you were to inflate it into today's dollars, it's really closer to a $10 billion estimate. And every instinct in the board was, we're trying to recruit people, we're trying to restore service, we're trying to focus on the state of good repair elements to be able to fix the T as we know the T, and here we've got this problem child of a $1 billion extra project, and man, oh man, we just don't need this headache. I would say it was 5-0 among the board members that we should walk away from this project. It's important to know, as we were in our deliberations and the world could see sort of where we were heading with this thing, that the governor intervened. The governor had a really interesting view on this, which was, this is an important project on its merits, but beyond the importance of its merits, if the T walked away from this project, the T would basically be saying to itself, for the effect of perhaps the next generation, that the T's not capable of doing big, important, complicated projects. And so he said, you're gonna find a way. And he really provided the leadership for us to figure out how to bring in new leadership for it. We put a great new leadership team in place. We hired some of the best forensic engineers in the world. We brought a team over from Europe to look at what was causing the cost to be so different. We put a different procurement package to put more incentives on cost reduction for bidders, and we put the job out to bid, and we put the project back to below its original estimate. And today we're about 40% done on that, and I'm getting increasingly confident that we're not going to need much of the contingency that we had set aside for that project. So I think it's a well-run project. But it was a good example. That was really the light bulb that went off in the FMCB's head to say, okay, we've got to be more aggressive, and that led to the red line, orange line, and green line, and blue line initiatives that I described today. All through this, the mayor mentioned that a number that we saved, $600 million. So I think our view is that we have saved about $1 billion. Let me describe how our math works. If you look at what the T's budget deficit was back in 2015, and you look at the trend lines of where the T's operating costs were going, the difference between where we were heading and the amount of money that we received from the legislature during that period, which is that generous $187 million, that's $600 million. So that's a savings of money that we did not need to ask the legislature of, because we were able to tighten our belts and figure out how to become more cost effective. That $600 million that was able to be spent on higher education, on youth programs, on the opioid crisis, mental health, and other things that the legislature has to deal with. Within the 187 that the legislature has generously provided to us, we generally have been able to put about $150 million of that 187 into an accelerated capital delivery project to get rid of that $10 million state of good repair backlog number. That again is an example of belt tightening. All that additional service we described, late night, early morning, Silver Line, additional commuter rail trips, etc., have all been done while maintaining the operating budget growth to under 2% a year. We struck really great new collective bargaining agreements with our Commons Union and the Machinists, who are the two central unions. I've got to say, a tip of the hat to them. They understood the crisis. They understood the need to reform work rules to get better productivity, that the T was never going to be able to continue to be a thriving enterprise that they did not participate in. We're delighted to have a highly unionized workforce that is much more productive today than it was a number of years ago. Now we've got a number of other measures to to go on. I'll just give you an example of things that we just don't do well at the T. And you really can't point your finger at the union folks. If I'm a good mechanic, I go into the T, I have to take a technical test to become a mechanic because these are pretty sophisticated buses and rail vehicles. So I pass a proficiency test, I go in, and I do 5, 6 good years of work. I show up every day, I do my work, I get highly rated. Well, someone asked me, gee, would you like to become the shift supervisor? Okay, geez, that sounds pretty good. So I go from being a mechanic to a shift supervisor. I move from the union I'm in to a management union. I've showed up every day, I've done my work. Now all of a sudden, I have to oversee my former peers. They're in a different union. I have to help them plan their work. I've got to make sure the supply chain of supplies comes to them. How many hours before we arrived at the T, how many hours of training did I get when I moved up to that position? As we say in East Boston, when we go up, the donuts, right? You're putting people in a position to fail. We collaborated with the business community in Boston, who was very generous in starting up a program that would allow us to basically emulate the Six Sigma program that GE uses. I love GE, they're struggling, but they actually do have a really good professional development program, probably one of the best in the world. We are now training folks as they move up from operators or machinists up to managers and more, and we're getting incrementally better productivity out of the garages because the work is being planned well. People understand whether the restraints of the collective bargaining agreements, what are the opportunities within the collective bargaining agreements, and it's really investing in people that's all the best. So let me just sort of stop yapping for a second and just talk one last item. We know we're facing a new era. Okay, the FMCB, I think, is we got about 14 months left. We're going to term out. The legislature is going to determine what happens in terms of future governance at the T. But I think the two most important things I would say is that we understand now more than ever there's a consensus. You can't look at the transit system alone. You've got to look at the entire system of all the transportation modes and how they work together, how we price them, how we raise revenue, and how they affect things like other goals, like mobility towards affordable housing, like climate change in terms of both reducing our carbon footprint as well as providing resiliency during the climate change era. And that's an important conversation for you all to be involved in. And secondly, advocacy, which has been a great strength of this region as we have seen it over the FMCB, as we see the mayor, we see the legislative delegation, we see the chamber, come to our meetings. And come to our meetings in the way that you've been doing it, which is a collaboration of cities. I would grow that collaboration to outside, I think, as the mayor hinted at. We've got a corridor along the commuter rail system. The mayor's been talking to the Mayor Revere, the administrator in Chelsea, for along that commuter rail corridor. There is huge opportunities that can provide benefits from the state. The kind of collaboration that you are doing is instrumental to the success of this region. And the other thing that I've noticed most recently is a discussion with folks at Transit Matters, folks at the Conservation Law Foundation, etc. Those really do make a difference to us, the recipients of the FMCB. When we see that integrated advocacy, it really helps us to think a little bit different. Don't forget, we're all volunteers, right? None of us are experts in these matters, so we show up once a week to deal with the matters at hand. But you really are our teachers. And I think it's important to always have that perspective to help educate us, help push us in the right direction, and don't ever stop that. So with your permission, I'd like to just go to answering any questions, comments.
I don't have a question, I have a suggestion. My name is Thomas Parsons. In 1947, I became a city council at the age of 21. The first thing we talked about was the Blue Line. when I started looking into the Blue Line back to 1900, they were talking in Boston about the Blue Line coming to Lynn, 1900. The only thing that's holding us up is money. The only thing that's holding us up. Why don't we do what they do in Colorado and Texas? Our congressman, when he got out of the Marine Corps, went to Texas and ran a rapid transit building from Dallas to Fort Worth. And they brought in private capital, working with public capital, and by doing that, opening it up for private capital to come in, they've got the money they need. The problems with the MBTA right now is money. My suggestion is that we get a legislature and have them go to the governor and get the governor to support bringing private capital, working with public capital to get the job done.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's a terrific suggestion. In fact, I know there's some discussion at the legislature right now. The MBTA could not do that kind of arrangement today, but there is discussion at in the legislature to in fact give us the power to do that, and we are very supportive of trying to in fact do that. So hopefully we'll
What I
get.
would like to do then, if that's the case, I would like to put a motion before this body right now this morning, that this group, the Lynn Business Group, one, to send a letter to the governor that we favor private capital coming into with public capital to work on public transportation in the Commonwealth. I make that as a motion. If somebody would second it, I would appreciate it. Motion made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Charlie Cassius, and the public-private partnership is actually taking effect as we're speaking. The T has a memorandum of understanding with the group that I represent, and we're building a new train station at the former General Electric River Stops work. And so with that, we've got 1,200 plus housing units that are going to be coming online, hopefully in the next few years. But when I first looked at this, I knew that we had a Blue Line ready train station in downtown. And so the money had already been invested by the MBTA in a Blue Line ready train station in Lynn. So my question was, well, why hasn't it happened yet? And should the other station that's under consideration as being planned by the MBTA for us, should that also be a Blue Line ready station? I've heard about the electrification of the line and possibly running two types of trains, which the mayor has when I spoke with him, he says that in other parts of the world they're running both Blue Line type transportation and commuter rail service all on the same line. If it could be done in other places, is that a consideration for our line here on the North Shore? And if so, when?
So the question's a little bit like pay grade. Let me describe sort of what I know and certainly what I don't know. What I do know is in the U.S. there are two regulatory regimes with respect to crashworthiness. One is an FRA standard, which is what governs the commuter rail system, and the other one is an FTA standard, which governs transit. Because in the FRA world, the standard has to accommodate these really heavy freight trains, the crashworthiness standard is much higher than what you find in the transit world. So what we end up facing is that the ability to run a rapid transit type train on the same track that a commuter rail train might run would require a completely rethinking of the type of equipment that we would run on the Blue Line. So while they could run side by side on separate tracks, running them on the same tracks does create a whole series of ripple effects there. And I don't know anyone else in the country that is running rapid transit service on effectively an FRA controlled track. In Colorado, as an example, they are running pretty regular service on an FRA controlled track. That's sort of the notion of this rapid rail service that can happen. So just because you're on the commuter rail system doesn't mean you can't run 10-minute headways or 5-minute headways. It doesn't mean you can't electrify them. But mixing the two is of certainly some difficulty. With respect to the future of the commuter rail, that's that process that you are currently engaged in. We have been pushing the staff pretty hard. We're going to get a series of recommendations from them around October. Our goal at the FMCB is to accept or modify their recommendations and to put in place a formal proposal for the conversion of the commuter rail system to a rapid rail system of some sort. And again, what that sort is. Now the key is there, that'll be a policy pronouncement by an FMCB that will be going out of business in about 6 months, right? And even if we vote to have that be a policy that the MBTA must pursue, we will not have the money for that project, right? So the playing field will immediately switch from let's make sure there's a consensus about what the right thing is to do at the end of 2019, and then shift to a discussion in early 2020 about how do we pay for this thing now and how fast can we go. So that's where that world is.
Yes. Hi, my name is Mr. Rose from Salem. You're talking about the Blue Line project. I mean, I think the wild card here is Revere. Revere is really going to control whether this thing really happens, because the Blue Line obviously ends at Wonderland, and whether you do the Point of Pines thing along that long peninsula or you do it along the current B&M or MBTA track, I mean, how are you going to get Revere to say, yeah, this is going to have a huge impact on our city? How can the people in Revere say this is also good for us?
Well, that's what the environmental process is designed to do, is to be able to look at the feasibility of the various alignments and to be able to think about sort of what gets impacted. So my limited knowledge of the alignments is one runs behind people's houses, the other one runs through the marsh, so they would have different environmental and different people kinds of impacts. But that's what the environmental process is designed to do. It's also consistent with engineering advancements, so we understand exactly where the alignment would be in either case, and in the case where you would run onto the old railroad right-of-way where there's some excess capacity, how do you make that move onto it from some kind of a flyover, so you're not doing a crossover onto the FRA tracks? All of that would be engaged. So that would be the process to which those issues would get sorted out. I have not heard that Revere as a city is opposed to any of this. In fact, when we're talking about, let's just switch to the commuter rail solution again, right? Where, just envision a future where the commuter rail folks, and they're in the back of the room, so they're probably telling me I'm saying the wrong thing. I'll look at Scott, who's the project manager. I mean, theoretically, we could be running 10-minute service out of Lynn into North Station, right, with pretty good frequency. If there's the demand for it, we got to make sure we understand the logistics at North Station. Revere is actually saying, hey, gee, you run right through Wonderland Station. How about we build Wonderland Station there? How about we create a new community of housing and jobs and all of that at the commuter rail and the old NECO plant? So they seem to be wanting to see more investment in rapid transit. Just like you, they're frustrated that residents can't get to jobs. Just like you, they're frustrated about the enormous amount of traffic that's there. So I would see them as a collaborator as opposed to someone that would put impediments in the way of any of these projects.
Last question, anyone?
Gentleman in front.
Good. My name is Mike Procopi. I'm a developer in Lynn. We spent a lot of time talking about big projects, right? Long-term projects, big money projects, the Blue Line, revamping the whole commuter rail system. If I could bring it back to two, maybe call them smaller, short-term solutions, if you could speak to them, and that would be cost of service on the commuter rail out of Lynn, essentially double plus minus what it would cost if it was a subway station. Certainly that affects demand, that affects ridership. $500 a month plus minus to commute that way. So if you could speak to that, and then the ferry, I think we kind of don't want to undersell the value of the water transportation. I think if you look at the demographics of the region and you look at kind of the potential ridership that's there for that, it's very, very similar to the Hingham ferry, which is, as we all know, super successful for the system. So just kind of looking at both of those as much shorter term solutions, not to negate what we've talked about with the bigger picture items here that are critically important, but kind of how do those play into kind of the next year or two as opposed to 10 and 15 and 20 years down the road?
Sure. So let me add a bus to that as well. You may or may not be aware that we're going to take some subset of the buses that run through Lynn, that run express into Haymarket, and run an experiment where we tie them into one land station and we drop the price from an express bus to a normal rapid transit bus. We think people will have a shorter overall journey. There will be a transfer, but it'll be at a lower price point. So faster delivery into downtown Boston, more distribution on the blue line throughout downtown Boston at a lower price point. So that's one thing that we're going to be introducing. I think it's in the summer pick. So it's either July 1st or October 1st, one of those times we're going to make that change. With respect to ferry service, thanks to the advocacy of this community, we're thinking much differently about ferry service than we have in the past. The rap on ferries were that they had the highest costs. And when you think about it from an operating perspective, it has a reason behind cost because you need to have a certain minimum personnel staffing on a boat, and the boats typically don't carry that many people as opposed to, you know, one driver on a red line that's carrying 6 carloads of people coming. We've changed that thinking, caused the staff to look at life cycle costs, which is really what is the full cost of service, building the tunnels, maintaining the tunnels, track, power, signal, etc. When you add that all in, boats are running on free right-of-way, right? They're basically running from terminal to terminal with the water being free. Now, there are restrictions, you can worry about weather and seasonality, but the whole thought process now, and it's baked into our reports, is that when you look at the all-in costs of all of our modes, ferry is the most cost-effective element that we run. We talked about that even at the board yesterday. We have a boat for Lynn that's under design development into construction, and I'm not caught up on sort of when that is due to arrive here. But we're also going to receive an update from the staff on how to expand the ferry system, how to get more competition with respect to operators. I don't know what the staff recommendation is going to be, but my sense of the sentiment of the board is that we need to buy more ferries. The fact that we only have a few ferries and we ask for operators to come in with ferries to bid in the system means we get one bidder. When you have one bidder, you get no innovation, you get no competition, you get a higher price point. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure from the board when the staff comes to report back for the T to buy more of its own equipment, put out long-term contracts, get good competition, think about innovating on services, and being able to think about how to use the ferries during off-peak times, and move into a new generation of ferry service delivery. I think the last question was commuter rail pricing. Commuter rail pricing is broken, not just in Lynn, everywhere. I mean, our pricing system today is based upon a 1950s view that there's a bunch of rich white guys with suitcases who come in the morning at 8:30 into Norton South Station, are oblivious to the rest of the world, and then at 5 o'clock they leave and they go back home and they do that. That's sort of how the pricing is based upon. That's what the world used to look like. The world has changed dramatically. The demographics of the communities up and down the region, North Shore to the west and South Shore, have changed dramatically. We need to think about it a little bit differently. The legislature has recognized this and put the imperative on us. We have a commuter rail study. We have to report back to the legislature before the end of the year to talk about repricing the commuter rail system. It is broken, it is wrong. I don't know what the new solution is going to be, but we certainly have to address that and address that as quickly as possible. We're serving them. Let me add something else. Probably many of you in Lynn are frustrated because you can't get on the train from time to time. That's happening throughout the commuter rail system. We're carrying more people than ever, and we don't have enough capacity. We're currently looking for a variety of short-term and long-term expansions of the fleet. We don't want to be too prejudicial in case we're going to electric, so we're looking for more short-term leases, maybe 10-year leases of equipment in case we go to full electric. But hopefully you'll be hearing from us over the next nine months about new different pieces of equipment. We've been talking to Amtrak about some electric locomotives that we could run to the Attleboro line. Those could free up. We've been talking to folks about, folks remember the old mud cars that used to run the diesel self-propelled DMUs? Well, we have found a batch of them in Vermont, and we found a batch of them in Texas. They're not being used. We have engineering teams out evaluating them to see whether or not they can be rehabilitated and put into use. Those are great for short-haul trips, like from Lynn into the city, etc. So this is going to be a big year of shift. Things that we put into place, more service that will be into place if we can get the equipment, of repricing of commuter rail coming out of the study, and then the recommendations of the future of the commuter rail. This is a big, big shift year for commuter rail. So hopefully that answered some of the immediacy things you asked. But we do worry about tomorrow's commute. We realize all the fancy plans in the world mean nothing to most people. We got to figure out tomorrow's commute and the next day's commute, and that's what sort of 90% of the operation is focused on.
Thank you, Chairman Ayala. That was amazing. We're now going to move into the feedback section of today's event. So on the table, you're going to find a blue sheet of paper. We'd like to ask one person at the table to kind of self-appoint as a facilitator, and one person at the table to self-appoint as a secretary or a recorder. It's important to know that the facilitator and the reporter should be contributing to this conversation. Oh, yes, those are important. We're only going to have about 6 or 8 minutes per question, so we're going to ask that you keep the conversations moving forward. And to kind of set the stage for this, I actually want to introduce Alexandra Markevich from the Mass DOT Office of Transportation Planning. She's a strong collaborator with me on the development of this, as well as the surveys you have on your table. I see a lot of them still upside down, so the sheet with all the sponsor logos on, please flip over and make sure you're filling out those surveys as well. Alexandra.
Hi, good morning. I just wanted to say hello and good morning. I'm going to be the project manager for the Lynn Transit Action Plan that Chairman Aiello and Mayor McGee mentioned, and we're really excited to get this project started. So this comes out of Focus 40, which we heard a little bit about from Chairman Aiello, which is the long-term investment plan for the T through 2040. And the strategy that we took with Focus 40 was to identify priority places. So these are places that have all the ingredients that we need for transit. So density, people who want to use transit, opportunities, housing, etc. But for several reasons don't have the type of service that they might actually have the demand for. And Lynn is one of those places, and so we're really excited to start this transit action plan, which is a way to do a deep dive into what are the public transit needs of Lynn in particular. Where do people want to go? How can we understand what are some of the barriers to using transit, to getting people where they want to go, and to reach those opportunities like jobs and resources, etc. And so through the Lynn Transit Action Plan, we're going to be reaching out to folks in all different mechanisms, and we're really excited that this is one opportunity that we can hear from you about transportation needs. And so feel free to find me after if you're interested in getting more involved. We'll be doing this over the course of a year. And in the end, we're going to identify some short, medium, and long-term solutions for improving transit, so improving travel times, making it easier for people to get where they need to go using the public transportation system. So these will include looking at some of those ambitious longer-term ideas, like looking at rapid transit and looking at commuter rail and ferry as well, and definitely looking at shorter-term solutions, as the Chairman Aiello focused on during his great speech. So thanks again for participating, and we're looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say about what your transit needs are in this region.
All right, so I am starting the clock. Please start with your questions and your discussion. So again, we want to make sure that the surveys, again, that piece of paper with the logos, the back side of them, you guys are filling those out. There's a blue folder on the table. We can make sure to throw those in there. The fun part of this is we can actually hear from the room if there's some interest in talking about the answers to some of the questions. Does anyone want to report back out on what they said on question 1? Any volunteers? Yes. Anyone want to report back out on some of the questions that were answered? You said you wanted to talk about question 1.
Oh, thank you. Hi, I'm Beth Debsky from the Salem Partnership. We have a table full of Salem people here, Salem State, the Salem Chamber of Commerce, Lynn business owner, but also president of the Salem Chamber, so just so you know where we're coming from in our answers. So on question 1, we said greater and more convenient access for faculty and students to Salem State University. The City of Salem and the Partnership and Salem State and North Shore Medical Center are advocating for a new project to put a train stop in South Salem that would benefit. It would be between Canal Street and Jefferson Ave, and it would benefit the university and North Shore Medical Center. We said that the public transit would reduce traffic, especially on Canal, Loring Avenue, and Jefferson Ave, and then it would also improve the environment.
Thank you. Anyone want to talk about question 2? I'll put Rick on the spot.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rick Wood. I'm the chairman of the Lynn Chamber of Commerce. Nice to meet my counterpart over there. So for question 2, what general transportation issues are important to you? We had cost, dependability, frequency, and capacity, which are kind of the same, because if there was more trains, you would need less cars in each train, but if you're going to have coming less frequently, you would need more cars. So that goes to the issue of people getting stuck on platforms because they couldn't fit into the trains. So those were our thoughts. Thanks, Colin.
Anyone want to talk about question 3?
There is no bus stop in this area where we have KIPP, St. Mary's, the Y, Tech. We'd love to see that. And we also talked about usability, and maybe there is one or maybe there isn't, but an app where you can simply say, I want to go here, how do I get there? Because looking at the maps, it's really hard to tell where you're going and where you're supposed to land and transfer. So something very usable, multilingual, and would benefit a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for the room, again for all your feedback. This is going to be invaluable both to the Chamber and our advocacy goals, as well as to Mass DOT. Now I'd like to introduce Senator Brendan Creighton to close us off today. He's been a huge advocate of transportation and as well as the region. Senator Creighton.
Thank you. Anybody still here? It's tough being the closer when we had such good speakers before us, but first, just want to say thank you to Colin for putting this together and for the partnership with the Salem Chamber as well as the Lynn Business Partnership. I come back in December to the Chamber Government Affairs Committee and had an ask, and I really wanted them to get more involved, I think, on a few issues that are important to all of us here, including transportation, housing, and education, and immediately put this together and got some really great speakers, so I appreciate that. Also like to say thank you to the Lynn delegation. We had Pete Capano here earlier, the new rep from Lynn, was on the Transportation Committee, as well as State Rep Dan Cahill, State Rep Laurie Ehrlich, and State Rep Donald Wong. The beautiful thing about the North Shore, along with this beautiful coastline and town and people, is that our delegation gets along very well together, and the same can be said for the folks from Salem and other North Shore communities. You don't get that everywhere, and we're hoping to use that to capitalize on some of our regional transportation initiatives. Also want to say thank you to Jim and Joe Aiello. It's a pleasure to get to sit next to you instead of across from you at a board meeting with cameras going in a very intimidating fashion, so it was great to get to chat, and thank you so much for taking the time to visit us in Lynn. Additionally, I want to say thank you to Alexander from Mascot. We're very excited to get this going. So one of the asks I had at the Chamber that morning in December was, certainly about the Blue Line extension, but also that everyone take part in the Lynn Transit Action Plan. This is going to be a great opportunity that not many communities in the Commonwealth get to have to really show the need for transportation on the North Shore. And that's the one thing I wanted to close with here today, is that we really do need to make our voices heard in terms of the need here. It's fun to talk about projects, and believe me, I could talk about the ferry, the Blue Line, commuter rail, bus all day long. But really, I think our strongest selling point, our strongest argument is going to be the need. And just to go through a few points, congestion, worse than ever. Recently, we were named #1, while some people may dispute that. Even if we're not, #1 is in the worst, not as in the best. Worst in the nation. Even if we're not #1, we're certainly up there. And one statistic stands out to me. There was a study done projecting the traffic growth when they were changing over the toll, when they're getting rid of tolls in the Sumner Tunnel. And they wanted to see, what is the traffic going to look like in 5 years? So this was done in 2013. In 2013, they estimated 2.5% growth in ridership. Now in 2018, that turned out to be 47% growth. That's just insane. Anyone that drives from Lynn or the North Shore to Boston sees it every day, and I think the congestion piece is really one of our strongest arguments. Not just in that it's costing consumers time and money, but also the environmental impacts as a state as we're trying to reach certain emission tools. Additionally, we're talking about the growth of the North Shore. We have a huge project going on Monroe Street, but also thousands of housing units permitted just in the downtown and waterfront over the past 5 years since we've made a number of zoning and pro-economic development initiatives at the local level. In Revere, we have tens of thousands of units being permitted. Where are all those folks going to go when they need to get to work? They're going to get on the road unless they have access, rapid transit access from the North Shore. Just recently, I forget how long ago, they take a look at the ridership numbers across all subway lines. The Blue Line was the only line that grew ridership. And I strongly believe that's because of the growth that we're seeing here that's going to continue to happen as we develop our waterfront and our downtown. Additionally, Logan Airport. There are plans now, the access to get to Logan is nearly impossible. There are plans to create better connectivity to the Blue Line there. And just in the past 5 years alone, there have been 10 million new passengers going through Logan. And moving forward, they project a 17% increase between the years of 2018 and 2024. Folks are going to continue to have a harder and harder time to get to Logan and continue to add to our congestion unless we're able to connect them there. If you have rapid transit access and connectivity from Lynn to Wonderland, you can really connect folks as far as the New Hampshire border, Rockport, and Newburyport along that line, and all the communities in between. Additionally, Chairman Aiello had mentioned the Red-Blue Connector. We're excited for that project. We'd love it to be the Blue Line extension, but that project only strengthens our argument as to why we need to have rapid transit connection to Wonderland from the North Shore. And additionally, with technology improvements that we continue to see, maybe an electrified line, everything's really coming in the direction that we needed to make our case. And just lastly, I touched upon it briefly, but the emission goals and climate resiliency. Last year, during those storms in March, the commuter rail line, the current commuter rail line, was underwater during high tide. They're going to need to update that line there, and as they do so, we need to make a case that connectivity, whether it's a blue line or some form of rapid transit, needs to be considered as they update those lines. So all of these comes with a cost, but as many folks have said before me, the cost of doing nothing is far greater. And that's why, as a business community here, and I see a wide range of businesses and nonprofits, community leaders, we need to continue to come together to make this case. This is really a start of a conversation. I hope you continue to partner on the Lynn Transit Action Plan. But we also have a bill. We have a bill that would have MassDOT conduct a feasibility study of creating rapid transit from Wonderland to Lynn. There's no bill hearing set yet, but once that date is set, I'm going to look to all of you and ask all of you to have your voices heard on the need, why we need this study done. The reality is right now is if the president or a private, public, company came to us and said, here's $1 billion, we would not be able to build a blue line, so we would not be able to build rapid transit to Lynn. We don't have the plans in place. So let's use this momentum, let's keep this conversation going, and I look forward to many more conversations with everybody here as we move these projects forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys again for a wonderful thing. A joke I always talk with my staff who did an amazing job setting this up today was the two goals of any good program is good food and on time. So with that said, we're ending about 5 minutes early. We had some delicious food. I would encourage you guys to grab something to go. There's some good bagels and coffee that can easily be brought up out and back to your office or whatever it is. So thank you guys very much for coming today.